Okay, so I'm going to show you how to set up this N8N MCP server, what to use it for, and then I'm also going to do some educational stuff around different types of MCPs, why they work the way they do, and just general software principles that apply to that stuff. Let's get into it. So we're first going to get into different types of MCPs from a connection perspective, how the MCP talks to the app you're using it with. Because I think I know I've seen over and over again, people don't understand that from a fundamental perspective, and that kind of makes it harder for them to actually get value out of these MCP servers. So the first thing we're going to start with from a fundamentals perspective, there are remote MCPs where it runs on someone else's machine. This is your websites, applications, right? From a fundamental perspective, an MCP server is just like any other app. And you work with remote applications every single day. You use the internet. You talk to someone else's application and you see the UI or whatever is exposed to you on the client side. There's the server side, which is remote, and client side, which is showing up on your machine, right? So if you look at this MCP server, you can see here the language is built in. It's built in TypeScript. The developer who built this, who I want to give props to, built this in TypeScript. And we're not going to get into the actual anatomy of this MCP server, although we could. But what this means is if you want to run this thing locally, there's different layers of tooling that you have to effectively run it locally that TypeScript needs. Before you even get to any specific app, you have to make sure TypeScript can run on your computer. So the first thing you want to make sure that you have installed on your machine is Node. So you just type in Node. It's just say welcome. I mean, this is basically what's used to run JavaScript on servers. So you need to make sure you have Node so you can develop applications to then put on a server somewhere. Then you need to have something called Node Package Manager, which is just NPM, right? We'll do NPM help. This is how you get someone else's software packages and reuse it in your own. So if we do npm list, you're going to see a bunch of red here because this is like the general overall install. Every single time you create a new application, you're basically bringing different packages to each project. So if we go, see, this is all of the software that's technically installed from Node, right, at the global level, because that's how it worked out, whatever. You can see in here, in this, when he pushed this application to GitHub, he made sure to specify these two things. So when you copy this application onto your machine or onto a server, it knows, hey, based on the package, these are the Node packages that we should have installed. So that's how that starts. And the last thing, we're going to go down to the start command to run this thing locally. You see npx. This is how you basically execute, right, X, Node packages automatically. So if we look at this command, it's a N8N MCP. It says npx. You're going to execute this Node package because you packaged the N8N MCP server as a Node package, and then you give it specific variables to say to this is how the MCP should talk to the Claude, not Claude Code, excuse me, the Claude desktop application, this is standard in, standard out. What type of logging it should provide, and just like these are basically called flags you set up to turn off and on when you start the application. And then finally, hey, this is the end you should talk to, and this is the API key you should use. So that's the basics of a local application. So now I'm going to show you how to actually set it up locally. So I actually really don't like local MCPs because you're limited in what you can do with them in terms of using them in workflows or agents or attaching them to APIs. And you have to deal with going into a Claude code or I'm using Claude Code a shit ton right now, so that's why I keep saying it. You have to go into the Claude desktop config or the Claude code config, because what has to happen is you have to tell the application itself. So This thing, when it starts up on your machine, right? If or whatever, doesn't matter. You have to tell it, hey, you have to run this command and open a terminal, right? And run this command so it actually knows, uh, it knows that it has to run the application locally itself and then talk to it. Versus something remote, like a deployed MCP server deployed on a railway, you just have to say, hey, this is the URL that you go to talk to the MCP server, and you talk to it using either HTTP streaming or server-side events. Those are two different protocols for talking to remote MCP servers. So the way it works is that Claude, right, or Claude Code, or any application that has an MCP client attached to it, I don't know why it's not loading right now, um, has something that's called a client, and it knows how to talk to servers, doing it like as attaching it, right? That's what enables all of this stuff to work. So to actually set this thing up, it's going to vary, and this is what point I want to emphasize. Because it's running on your machine, how you set it up is going to vary on your machine. So if you're running it on a Mac or a Linux, the commands and files you're going to have to navigate to set this thing up are going to be different than Windows. So there are tutorials for how to access the Claude desktop config, but by and large, it just means you're going to have to go in and set up this command. So it knows, hey, run the N8N MCP using this standard, using standard and standard out. And here's what you should give the app, the MCP server, to connect to, right? But when you do go to set this up, you should use Cursor or something else that can handle the formatting of adding this thing for you. So the way you should do this is you should go to full configuration, just copy that, go find your API key and your N8N instance URL, right? And then you just go to here, and you can do Control Control K, and say, hey, add this for me. Or you can just do this in any AI and generate it, and say, here's the format. I just want you to fill this in for me. And you can literally just type enter, and it'll do it for you. So I'm using Cursor because I do a ton of development work. Anyways, you could use a fucking anything that has generative AI to do this, right? So I'm going to say accept, and this is wrong because I know that the N8N API ends with /1. So this works now. I know because I tested it, right? Why it works is that when you start up Claude Code, it spins up this little application and it runs on your machine. If this was set to run on something like a railway, it would just talk to it over the internet, right? So this is my N8N like test space where I'm self-hosting. So I'm going to have it create a workflow for me just to show you that this thing works. The big difference between this and the one I made is that this has a database hooked up to it that basically has a list of all 527, or however many are in there, nodes. So the AI agent can actually go and reference the nodes to actually create the right workflows. So you see, it's not just creating the workflow, it's searching nodes first and understanding from the database, right? So this has like a mini RAG built into it. Let's see if it actually sees if there's an MCP client thing to add on. I don't know if it'll work or not. Okay, so it's finishing up here. Let's reload the page and see where it actually is. So one of the things that, there it is, that's pretty cool. I always love these things. One of the things, so it's weird. Use an AI agent node, right? Open. It might be the way I'm viewing it. Tool agent. I mean, that's technically correct, right? MCP client, but it didn't create the client tool correctly. So you say it can't go into here. So we're going to delete this. And you see add actual tool, right? MCP client tool. So for whatever reason, it wasn't able to actually get that correct. That's not super surprising to me. It seems like he's actually prioritized coverage of more of the base nodes. So like actually being able to say, hey, go get the Slack node and use it correctly and stuff like that. Either way, like this is still very good. And you can see here, if we go to the tools it has access to, I just wanted to show off just how much it actually has available to it. So you can check executions, it helps with debugging, validate workflow. Like the creators put in a ton of thought into this. I just want to give them props for that. But yeah, so if you want to deploy this thing remotely, that's a whole different story, right? And I wanted to deploy this thing remotely myself, but there's some limitations on what you can do with it. So I deployed this MCP server to Railway. So in here, I use Railway a ton already. That's where I'm hosting my own N8N. You see, I think he had it. Yeah. So Railway has a template system. You click deploy on Railway. It spins up the whole thing for you. The way it works is it takes the application right here, TypeScript. You can see that little tiny percentage that's Docker file. That's for something that's called Docker. So Docker takes your app and actually puts it in a little container, literally called containers, and isolates it. So it brings its own operating system, it brings its own node installation, everything that needs to run. So you can always have a standardized environment for running the application. So that's what putting it on Railway does. And then you can actually talk to it over the internet in its little standardized container. So why did I show you how to set up the local limited version if the remote version is so easy and is better? There's some limitations with this MCP server specifically. So the way you talk to remote MCP servers is you go to this URL, right? And it's going to say something like not found, or hey, he set it up so it actually provides some useful information, which is great. And it tells you, hey, you can talk to the MCP server by /MCP. So when you give it to an MCP client like Claude, you're going to say, hey, this is /MCP. This is how you talk to it. And here's information. Because every single remote, if you go to, like we can go and I can share right here. MCP client's going to ask for a URL, open, and we're going to say, oh yeah, here, just talk to this endpoint. No problem, right? This is not the case for this server, and I'm going to use it as a teaching opportunity. So if we go to the deeper deploy documentation, I think it's right here. Yeah, you'll see that he's set it so the server requires a auth token. So basically it's your own API key, and you run this and it generates a pseudo-random API key. That's the name for it. The problem is most MCP clients don't accept this communication standard, basically. Technically, you might be able to use it in something like N8N, but in Claude, it doesn't allow you to configure this. So that's why. And I know it's very in the weeds and very niche and specific, and it's some weird authentication thing. But this is what thinking architecturally or thinking like an engineer looks like. You have to peel back the layers of the problem and actually figure out, well, am I going to figure out how to set up a proxy so I can get Claude to talk to the proxy to talk to the MCP server because there's a authentication requirement? Probably not, man. Like it's like no, I'm not going to do that. And it's just about making practical trade-off decisions that are based both in end business value and technical understanding. So that's what I wanted to show you here today. I hope being able to actually use the MCP server local through Cloud Code locally is still super valuable to you. And if you like more of this, this type of content I put out. So thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye.